Hello everyone and welcome back to the video. Today we're going to be talking about the top 5 most one-sided matchups in Age of Empires 2. These matchups, when you see them, it's absolutely disgusting. You realize one civ is just bound to win, the other civ's going to be absolutely miserable. And it's not that one civ is just better than the other, it's just that in that particular matchup, that one civ strength completely counters the other civilization. Usually if you're having the unfortunate civilization in that particular matchup, you need a miracle to win because everything's stacked against you. I didn't base this list on stats, I based it on my own personal experience, and I've played a lot of games. I feel like I kind of have a feel of it, but feel free to let me know in the comments which matchup I missed out or which matchup you think is extremely one-sided that you think deserves a spot on this list. I have 5 here and an honorable mention, but before I hop into the list, quickly shout out to the fact that I'm hosting a tournament August 1st to 26th, top 5 players in the world, $7,000 prize pool at least, because viewer prize pools will go into, viewer donations will go into the prize pool. It's going to be all covered on my Twitch channel, live streamed. The show's going to be crazy. Definitely hop in there if you want to support me, if you want to watch live. I'll see you guys there. Love to see all of you guys there, of course. And without further ado, let's hop into the list. Alright, starting off at number 5, we've got Byzantines versus Tatars. Now, this matchup is incredibly interesting because on paper, Tatars have great cav archers. They also have really solid Kashyyyks, and they have some decent options in the siege, but they don't really have that much to do to counter camels. Like, you can go your own camels as Tatars, but the camels from Byzantine being that much cheaper, 25%, makes them very difficult to counter. So when I'm considering this matchup, I'm right away thinking that Castle Age onwards, Byzantines can just go camels. And what do Tatars do? Every single unit that the Tatars have is going to be weak to a discounted camel. If you go your own camel, it's not going to work because the other camel is cheaper. Even though Byzantines lack bloodlines, it barely matters. The numbers are just way too much. And then if Tatars wants to go halbs, their halbs are extremely weak, lacking a lot of armor. And so Byzantines playing camel plus skirm, getting a discount on both, just makes this matchup so difficult for the Tatar player. They have almost no units that work against the Byzantine composition. Not only that though, but thinking about the early game, Byzantines getting cheaper skirms and spears helps them survive against Tatars. And Tatars are not some early game powerhouse. They're able to take a big advantage versus Byzantine anyway. Usually as Tatars, you have like the longer lasting sheep. You can play a smooth early game, but you're not that powerful in that early game dominant civ. And so in this matchup, it usually winds up going to the mid and late game. Byzantines get the cheaper imp, they get the cheaper units, and they just have such an easy time going into that late game and absolutely dominating the Tatars, mainly using the cheap Byzantine camel. Very hard matchup, but not the hardest on the list. Moving on now, we've got at number 4, Italians versus Persians. Another one of those matchups where if you just think about it, in the late game, what do the Persians have that can deal with Genoese crossbowmen from the Italians? Let me simplify it for you. They've got nothing. The Persians have so little to deal with the Genoese crossbow. Think of it this way. Paladin and Hussar, the main options for Persians, don't really work. They get absolutely shredded. Unless you have a massive advantage going Paladins, you're not going to be able to break through the Genoese Expo DPS. It's simply way too much damage. And then if you go for anything away from your stable, you have skirms, but they don't have bracers. You're inherently weaker. You can also go like the trash bows, but those don't do that much damage because the Genoese Expo has an extra armor and you're also lacking bracer. And so if you realize it, Persians have very little to do against Italians in late game. If you go heavy scorpion, they have bomber cannon, skirms, Italians have hussars anyways. And so the Persians are completely out of options. You could just try to go for war elephant just to die in style because that's the only thing that you're really going to accomplish. Now you might be thinking, okay, well, Persians can win earlier. Well, not really, because Persians don't really have that many options that Italians can't deal with. Italians up faster to every age because they get the discounts, and they also have, monk tech tree that's solid, a lot of good options, a very wide tech tree, and an imp. You can even go condottiero. If the Persians are making it messy, you get a faster imp. Condottiero is always an option to deal with any hand cannon, bomber cannon push. So in general, Italians have all the options to deal with Persians, and then going into late game, if you get the Genoese Expo, you're beating any Persian composition. It's not even a problem. So Genoese Expo plus Hussar for Italians is unstoppable, and if you get there, Persians can only resign. Moving on to number 3, we've got the fan favorite, Britons versus Burmese. I'm a huge Burmese stan. I'm like the one guy who says Burmese are really good, but even I can't make this matchup work. This matchup is so incredibly difficult. Britons have everything that they need to deal with the Burmese army. Think of it this way. And once again, let's just break down what units Burmese can go for. If Britons go arbalest or longbowman plus halberdier, you can just do this blind. You don't have to see what the Burmese guy's going for. If you just go for that comp, Burmese can't do anything. Their skirms lacking the second armor upgrade makes them incredibly weak to long-range arbalest and long longbowmen. Not only that, but any Burmese cavalry or even elephants, despite being super tanky, will simply die out the halbs in the long term. On top of that, if they try to go for bombard cannon, the Briton range will simply be way too good. And also having the Werewolf Trebs with 17 range lets the Briton player just siege from really far, sit behind it with arbalest or longbow and a bunch of halberdier, and the Burmese player can never really engage that. There's no single option that they can use that can kind of trade effectively versus that composition. And so the Burmese player is forced to fight and win early, but it's really difficult to beat the Britons early because they can just go with 8 range X-bow and camp behind walls. And so Burmese skirmisher being pretty weak, it makes it a very hard task to push a Briton player who's simply playing defensive. He almost has to guaranteed make a mistake for the Burmese player to even have a chance. Yes, you have mandate per cavalry, and so you guys might be thinking, it's not that bad. Burmese have that upgrade, gives them more damage versus crossbows or versus the archer line in general, but let me tell you, it's not enough. The halberdiers are just simply too strong, and you can never really get on top of the arbalest. Your skirms die too fast as well. You'll have a really hard time engaging onto the Briton army, and you're just not going to find a win earlier than that most of the time. So this matchup is incredibly difficult. I'll finish it by saying that Arambai don't even work because arbalest from long range are going to destroy that unit as well, more often than not. So this matchup is incredibly difficult and not one you're going to have a good time with if you're playing as the Burmese. Moving on to number 2, we've got Franks versus Dravidians. Dravidians is one of the most vulnerable civilizations that's come out in recent times. The fact that its stable is so bad means that it's inherently limited in its early game options. You can't really go for a big scout rush and feudal. You can't make knights and castle. Your light cav are very weak, and so naturally you're forced into range. And you have good skirmishers. Which skirms are better, Franks or Dravidians? Most people say Dravidians. I say Franks. Why? Because if you go Franks skirmishers versus Dravidian skirms, yes, their skirms fire faster, but then you mix in knights. Checkmate. What do Dravidians do? They literally can't mix in anything that works against skirm plus knights. If they try to go pikemen, you can just bait the pikes towards your knights, shoot the pikes with the skirms, no problem, easy does it. If he goes for skirm plus monk defense, you can just mix in siege. He doesn't have redemption. So your skirm knight plus siege comp will be literally anything that Dravidians can make in the mid game. Not only that, but Dravidians can't really win early game versus Franks because Franks have a really solid early game themselves. Free horse scholar, extra HP on the scout, and the berry bonus. Yes, the Dravidians get extra 200 wood and faster firing skirms, but the Frank bonuses are simply on par or even slightly better. So Dravidians don't really have that early game power spike that they can make use of, and the Franks can easily wipe them in the mid game. In fact, if you're playing as Dravidians, you have such a tough task to hold the Franks in mid game, and the only saving grace is that in late game, you could make an argument that Dravidians are okay versus Franks, but let's be honest, Franks will have full map control in the mid game. They're going to do a lot of damage. They're going to take at minimum 4 relics, probably 5 with all the map control they gain with the knights and skirms, and even in late game, if you get to arbalest Hal with Woot Steel or whatever you want as Dravidians, Franks with the 5 relics can easily just go skirm Pala or like onagers or heavy scorpions plus paladin, some heavy gold comp that is going to just be really hard to deal with. So Dravidians could beat Franks in late game, but I just doubt you're getting there in a fair and balanced state. So this matchup is incredibly favored for the Franks. Alright, before I show you guys number 1, you guys can go ahead and guess which one you think it is. I'm going to go ahead and talk about an honorable mention here, which I'm sure a lot of people think it deserves a spot on the list, and I kind of agree, but I'm kind of hesitant as well. It's Goths versus Mayans. This is the classic one-sided matchup that on paper the Goths should win every single time. And you know what? On some maps like Arena, some closed maps, I agree. If Goths get the late game, Mayans have absolutely nothing. They can't ever hold pure Husk Roll. Their two-handed swordsmen are not strong enough. They don't get champions. So if they go for that option, it's not going to work. Eagles die to Husk Rolls, Plumes and Arbalests die to Husk Rolls. Guys, checkmate. You get to Goths and Imp with Mayans, you've got no options. However, the reason why I'm hesitant to add this on my list is because in high level, Mayans have such a good early game that usually they actually beat out the Goths and they just completely outpace them before Goths can get the Husk Roll and get to the late game. In lower levels, this is not true. Goths always get the late game because no one knows how to end the game. So Goths get the late game, you get the Husk Rolls, you win. It doesn't matter if you're 40 fills behind, guys. You're both floating 10k res. I know how the low level games go. But this is a good thing because that means that you get the late game with Goths and you're going to win for sure. So this matchup in most levels, I would say it's heavily favored for Goths and it would probably be like number 1 on my list. In pro play, I think it deserves a spot on the list somewhere. I just didn't know where to put it. So this is a very one-sided matchup. If it gets to late game, Goths destroy Mayans. However, Mayans should have the advantage for the first like 25-30 minutes of the game and do with that information as you will. It's an honorable mention. It's a very unique case. So I left it here and I'll let you guys be the judge of that. Moving on to the number 1. All right, at number 1, I've got Mongols versus one of 2 civilizations. I'm going to show you the one I have on the list, Mongols versus Teutons. Alternatively, you can have Celts. It's a very similar option, but I think Mongols countered Teutons more than they countered Celts. Hear me out. Mongols have Mangudai. Teutons have nothing versus Mangudai. GG. That's as simple as it gets. If Mongols get to Mangudai versus Teutons, Teutons have literally no unit that deals with that. If you go Paladin, you don't have Husbandry, and Mangudai in general have good DPS. They can kill Paladin pretty easily. They can kite them all day long, no problem. If Teutons go anything from the range, you're lacking Bracer. It's not going to do that much against Mangudai Hussar. And if Teutons go Siege Onager, heavy Siege, it can work. Mangudai have a bonus versus Siege. And if the player controlling them has hands that can micro, then you're going to easily be able to kill all the Siege that Teutons can go for. Also, we have higher HP Hussar. So sniping Siege Onager with a bunch of Hussar in case you're too scared to micro, then that's also an option. And so the Teutons Death Ball of Halberdier Siege doesn't really work out too well versus Mongols. Also, Mongols have their own Siege that actually moves faster. So even if Teutons get to SO, Mongols can get to SO, and that is also a winning matchup for Mongols. There's no way you spin this matchup where the Teuton player can win. Mongol player has to have like the worst game in history of ever recorded Age of Empires 2 for the Teutons to win this matchup. It's that bad. And it's one of the freest matchups ever. You get Mongols, just get to Mangudai as soon as possible in Castle Age, and then just get some economy, control the map with Mangudai, and it's a free win. Teutons have literally nothing against that unit. They don't even have a hope. They have to win before you get to Mangudai, but Mongols have the better early game, so that's not even a good strategy or a good approach. So yeah, this is a really hard matchup, and I've lost it once to Viper, so shout out to the people who remember that game. But that won't happen again, I promise. All right, thanks so much for watching this video, guys. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and yeah, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.